Welcome back to the I Empower podcast, season 2, where we hear inspirational stories and then we turn that into art that reminds us to be great. Each week, we dive deep into the story of a special person who discovered their power against all odds. But it doesn't stop there. All of the inspiration is then memorialized into a single unique painting that reminds us to be great. So if you, my friend, are looking to step out of your own way and into your life's full and well-deserved potential, this is the place for you.
And especially the female body, right? It's like this big mystery.
Yeah.
Which there is some beautiful mystery to the feminine, and our body and anatomy and physiology is just so important to understand, because if we don't understand it, then why would we have gratitude for it or appreciate it?
So, Caytlyn, thank you so much for being on today. I'm really intrigued, and what you do is so fascinating, and I think it's definitely something that I think more women should know about. And I actually found you on Instagram. I always like to tell my listeners where I find my guests. One of your posts came through my Discover page and it caught my attention, and I hopped onto your feed, and you have a wealth of knowledge, and it's so interesting to me. I don't know that there's enough talk about it, so I'm really excited to have you on so that we can talk about what it is that you do. So I'll have you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, awesome. I'm so excited to be here and appreciate you for having me and hosting this and sharing your work as well as mine with the world. So thank you. And I'm Caytlyn. I am a pelvic care practitioner and coach and mentor for women in health and body, and also how that impacts, there's so much integration of how that impacts our life in all areas once we feel really safe and secure and confident in our own body. And I share this work from lived experience. My body of work is called Integrative Pelvic Care. And it really is an ode to my personal journey from an abusive relationship and growing up in an abusive home to a lot of grief, losing my little sister to suicide, and the healing journey that I embarked on. And, how that was all manifesting in my body and how I was showing up in the world. And so from, everything from just slowing down and tuning into the body and having more appreciation to it, to the deeper pelvic work, and really reintegrating this space, the pelvis, our center, our foundation, back into relation with all parts of ourself.
It's so incredible. I went through some of your feed, and I want to just touch on what you said, how the pelvis is the center of us and the importance of having that healed and working well. And I've heard about a lot of women who do like pelvic floor work after childbirth. But I hopped on one of your lives, and you had mentioned where the work should start before you decide to start a family. So like how would I know that I would need something like this? Like, tell me what this is, because I'm so fascinated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that all women, really all people, but I specialize in women or female-bodied people.
I didn't even know that it was a guy thing too. That's interesting.
Yeah. And I can't speak for the lived experience in a male body, but I can certainly speak for a lived experience in a female body. And the female pelvis is different, and we have a uterus at some point. We have a uterus, and so bringing that back into the center of our center. The uterus is really the center of the female body. And womb, if you no longer have a uterus, this energetic space is still there. And because of the stories that we have received in the world, because of the disconnection from this space for generations, all women can find benefit in this work. We don't have to wait for symptoms. We don't have to plan a family you can start this because you want a deeper relationship with your body. Most of us hold so much shame about this space, even just from, when we're little, we aren't told our body parts. We hear pee-pee and the privates, and there's so much shame just instilled in that. And, then thinking about how we were introduced to menstruation and how that is called sometimes a curse.
Yeah.
And what that does when we hear that about a natural part of ourself and how that shows up later in life. And because we aren't typically addressing the allopathic medicine world, which is based on studies with a male body, is not addressing anything until there's symptoms. A lot of women are told that this is normal, it's all in your head, this is just part of being a woman, go home, take some pills, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
And that's just not acceptable. And I heard it too many times for myself.
Yeah.
I was told that cramps, debilitating menstrual pain was normal, something that ran in the family. And, it's just something that because of how we sit, because of how we are pretty sedentary compared to how our bodies were really designed for, because of the impact that just being in a stressful environment has on our tissues and how we hold tension, all of these tissues are impacted. So really opening up this space and working with our entire body, including our deep pelvis, our vagina, our cervix, our uterus or womb and anus, all of it is, just really having this relationship with ourselves and our body that we are living in, hopefully for a while longer.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. Because I wanted to, there's like so many things that I want to talk to you about because you've touched on a few things already. And I'm like, okay, just focus, Jessica. So, it's interesting that you mentioned the shame behind body parts and natural things that happen with every woman. My kid just got the waiver for sexual education in school, and I was like, why are they sending waivers home for that? Like everybody, this is how everybody goes through this. So why do we have to get permission to teach that? Do you think that this is a cultural thing because I know that there are some cultures, you mentioned shamed with menstruation, that actually, the women are not allowed to work for during their menstrual cycle. They're kind of shunned in a way, when it happens. Do you think it's a cultural thing? And how do you think we can get past that?
Yeah, that is a great question. And it's so sad and interesting and kind of funny that you have to sign, you brought up the waiver piece. And I really think a lot of that comes from, this is hypersexualized, right? So if we think of the pelvis, if we think of sexual health, we automatically jump to sex. And there's a lot of shame around that, even though we are blasted 24/7 with sexy advertising and what it means to be sexy. But then if you're a woman and you're too sexy, there's this slut shaming that can happen. And so it's so confusing.
Yeah. We're just living in a constant state of what the fuck?
Yeah. And typically the women that I work with are experiencing, I work with women all over the world. And the ones that come to me typically have a story that resonates. So they've been brought up in a culture that it does shame, that does have a lot of confusion. I always say we get manuals for everything except the body that we live in, which is just insanity. And especially the female body, right? It's this big mystery.
Yeah.
Which there is some beautiful mystery to the feminine. And our body and anatomy and physiology is just so important to understand, because if we don't understand it, then why would we have gratitude for it or appreciate it? And definitely we're not going to love it if we don't understand and appreciate it. So, I think that, and I believe that there are other parts of the world, other cultures, probably more like tribal cultures that haven't been touched as much by I want to say normal, this everyday society that most listeners are going to be used to, not necessarily normal, but common.
Yeah.
And I think that talking about it, first of all, is a huge piece. I was someone who never talked about my menstrual pain or numbness during sex or digestive issues or any of these things ever. Like, never in a million years did I think I would be here. And the more that I have found my voice, excuse me, and been able to share my story, the more I hear from other women, again, from all over the world, who have similar stories, who have lived through the medical system that told them, oh, that's okay, it's normal, just it's all in your head. And although we come from totally unique backgrounds and all have a unique story, we still have so many similarities in how that manifests in the body, and we're all living in these bodies. So having space, most of the programs that I offer do have a group format because of the sisterhood and the bonding that can form and the healing that can happen just from hearing and witnessing and seeing other people walking this path also.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, I mean, because everybody, I feel like I can speak for a lot of people when I say this, that we just want to feel like we belong. We want to know that we're not alone. And so I think that's amazing that you have created a program that allows us to connect in that space. Oh my gosh. So tell me about that. Like, what do you do? Like, how do you do that?
It's so powerful. And I am just so inspired by the women who choose to be there and to do this work, because there is so much fear, right? When we haven't gotten answers, like, what if this doesn't work? What if this lady on Instagram that I found doesn't know what she's talking about, or I can't do this, or something happens. Like, all of these fears come up, and it is so normal. And I had them too. I have them too. It is natural. And there's deep conditioning in learning to fear our bodies, especially as women, and learning to fear symptoms and sensation. And most of my programs are online. And even if we decide to work together in person for intravaginal body work, then we also start online. And a big piece of that is taking our bodies into our own hands and responsibility that we have for our bodies. And if somebody is coming to me like they want to be fixed or healed or a symptom managed, that is not the work that I do. It is important to me and feels much more ethical to me to have a co-creative process in this, and knowing that you have a relationship with your body, and there's some baseline and there's some personal initiative that goes into it. And when you do this work with yourself, it is sustainable. There's so much that we can do. We start with not the pelvis, because just orienting towards just saying, okay, I'm going to start paying attention to the space in my body can bring up a lot.
Yeah.
And if we're and if we're already experiencing symptoms that we probably have challenging feelings or emotions about, like frustration and fear and I am broken, and we just go right there, we've missed all these other layers of the body and creating space around the pelvis, right? Because the bony structure of the pelvis, our reproductive organs, there are muscles that attach to either side of the pelvis. Fascia connects our entire body, the connective tissue. So we can't work, the nervous system runs through the whole body. We can't work with just one muscle or one tissue and not impact the rest of it. And so much of this work is holding space for the emotions that come up. And there is trauma from all different kinds of traumatic events. that occur from being bullied, from, accidents or assault, or, even if we're told no by our parents when we're little kids, that can be a traumatizing experience when we're don't understand that the world doesn't revolve around us.
Yeah.
And that can really start to impact our tissue, the quality of our tissues, and lead to, how our posture is affected if we're, closing our heart and rolling our shoulders forward and protecting our vital organs. All of that abdominal cavity becomes constricted as well. And it's rare that someone comes with just, a pelvic diaphragm, commonly called floor dysfunction. There's usually digestive stuff. There's usually hormonal imbalances, and it's so all interconnected.
Oh my gosh. This is incredible. I've mentioned this before on the show. I used to work for some fantastic chiropractors, and I've taken a lot of knowledge from that. And when I started this project, and the more people that I talk to, the variety of people that I talk to who have experienced tough situations or trauma in their life, everyone always goes back to the trauma. The body holds trauma, and that is just. I felt like for the longest time, again, before I started this project and dealing with my own traumas, that I was just kind of walking around in this shell of a body. And so many people talk about how important it is to really connect with your body, understand your body, and know your body. And it's just like mind blowing to me, the more people that I talk to that talk about this and the importance of that. And so I wanted to touch on the trauma response the trauma that you mentioned, of how, the body holds that. And especially, I've seen, one of your posts where you talk about sexual trauma and things like that. I never put that together as to what could be like, so what could that cause? Like, how would you know that you're having these symptoms from something like this?
Yeah, I mean, it can show up in so many ways, and sexual trauma can definitely be a big one, and something that people tend to jump to around pelvic trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And as I just touched on, traumatic experiences can be a whole spectrum of things. And the body does hold on to trauma. And, if you've had pelvic pain, like menstrual pain, digestive issues, even depression or cognitive dysfunction, maybe your voice hasn't been expressed, it can seem like this myriad of symptoms that you're kind of playing. I picture it as like a game of whack-a-mole, where you're like focused on one thing and then that is working, but then something else pops up. Or you go through life and you have every digestive issue in the book be thrown at you, or you deal with different, nerve dysfunctions in your pelvis or vaginal area. And I really believe that coming to the root of our body, which is the pelvis, and addressing these things from that space, both, if we have had direct trauma, most of us have been in sexual situations that we weren't fully aroused, that we were just kind of like, okay, like, let's do it, but I'm not
let's
really
get
there.
This over with. Yeah.
And if our vagina and cervix isn't engorged all the way, if it isn't ready, then that can be traumatic to those tissues. And that can be a lot, I want to validate, to wrap our heads around, because it can be like, oh, that's like, what's that sexual trauma? There could just be so much about it. And I really encourage not comparing, because every one of your stories is valid. We don't have to prove our trauma was worse or not as bad as somebody else. It can be I see it as a pattern, as a way to like put others first or not do the work for ourselves. If we're like, well, I wasn't traumatized as a child. I didn't have, my family was really good to me. I didn't have abuse in the home. Like, none of that happened to me, so I'm fine. It can be a way to just dissociate and kind of skip doing this deep self-work. And there's
Yeah.
no shame. This is not work for everyone at every single point in their life. And I want to name that because it is deep.
Yeah.
It can bring up a lot. It can be, I say that it is inherently generational. We work with ancestors and generations of women before us when we do this work. We don't have to go, looking for that.
Wow.
And it can be, so powerful when we do feel really safe. I see a lot about the regulating the nervous system these days, which I think is a great conversation. I think the awareness is fantastic. And this is not a mindset game. We can't mindset our way into regulating the nervous system. We have to be in our bodies. We have to nourish the physical tissues of the nerves and lymph and muscles and blood flow and all of that. And, it takes practice, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time every day to practice, but it is something where we are really retraining our bodies and ourselves to feel safe in these vessels.
Oh my gosh. Well, I wanted to circle back to the chiropractic knowledge. One of the things that they always talked about, obviously when you're working with the spine, and they would do chiropractic pelvic work, which I'm sure is completely different than what you do, but how the body is electricity. It runs on electricity. They always would use the metaphor, think of a water hose. If you put a kink in it, the water's flowing when it's good. You put a kink in it, it's not getting what it needs fully, and then it can start manifesting in other parts of the bodies. And they would treat people, you think of a headache and you're like, oh, you don't go to a chiropractor for a headache, or, they would do digestive health too with chiropractic. So I think that is so important to mention that, basically what you're saying is that if anything, that traumas manifest in different parts of the body.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we have tightness, tension in our core from our abdomen and our root, because when we go through life and we're tracking our safety, and which is why wouldn't we be in this fast-paced society, right? Our nervous systems haven't evolved as quickly as society has. So we're always tracking that. And we can hold so much tension from our root up, the pelvic diaphragm and up. We suck in our bellies from a young age. I talked a little bit about emotional trauma and how we start to hide and curl down our shoulders to protect our heart and our organs. And over time, as we hold tension, I say tension plus time equals less blood flow. Less blood flow equals less lymph flow. And as those tissues become dry or ischemic or hypertonic, the nerves are also impacted. And this is the center of our body. So if there is constriction and the blood isn't flowing through our center, it's like a 3-lane highway having 2 lanes closed down. There's going to be congestion in the whole being. So it's so important that we open up our whole body, our whole abdomen, before we even go into deep self or with a practitioner pelvic work, because it, again, cultivates this relationship with ourself, with our nervous system. We get blood knocking on the door of these deeper tissues, which equals healing. Blood, nutrients equals healing. Yeah. And, then we can really, if we do work with a practitioner or we do internal pelvic work with the pelvic diaphragm, we are then able to really receive that instead of being in this state of am I safe? Am I okay? I need to fix this symptom. I don't know. This is really scary, and kind of being re-traumatized instead of actually healing at a deep level that is available to us through this space in the body.
Yeah. So in your practice and from your experience, when people what does it usually take for someone to reach out to you to seek this kind of care? Because you mentioned going to the doctor, and a lot of women are gaslit on it's normal. You're an unfortunate one that has a bad period. You have a heavy flow, like an abnormal, what we would think would be abnormal heavy flow. You're heavy menstrual. Even, I can remember a friend of mine, in our early 20s who had pain during intercourse, and our doctors had no explanation. It was just one of those things that like she's just gonna have to live with. And so she chose to not be intimate for a really long period of time. And so like how does someone like get to the point of saying, okay, I'm not taking the prescription drug, these doctors are not listening to me, I need something?
Yeah, it usually comes from a symptom or being told that, this is going to be normal. And there's like I really attribute it to some deep inherent wisdom that is still in the body, that is still telling, like nudging you that there is another way. And, from my own personal experience, I had done a lot of healing work. I had done a lot of body work, and I still had numbness during sex. I still had digestive stuff going on, and I still had really, really painful menstrual cycles. And I was to the point, I was like, I'm going to get a hysterectomy. Like, if I can't find something that works with this, like, I'm over it.
I know. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Which unfortunately is not uncommon. It is. Hysterectomies are the number 2 surgery in the US for women behind C-sections. And it's something like 1 in 3 of us will have had one by the time we are 60 years old.
Oh my gosh. Like I want to talk to you about that too.
It's like this, just throw the organ away. Which, taking an organ out, I always think about it, if men had like their testes removed as much as women had their uterus removed, we would know about it. There would be like newsflash, you'd hear about it every single day, and we would get to the root of it. And this is like, just get rid of it. It's having some dysfunction. I talk to women that are, in their 20s that are offered hysterectomies or that go through with it. And I want to say, if you're listening and you have been, there is no shame. And this work is absolutely important, and processing emotionally and physically and energetically, as well as working with that space in your body and the scar tissue that comes from surgery, is so, so important. Yeah. And, there's a lot we can do to work with that energetic space. And, I think that really just nourishing our body and being so gentle with it is such a way forward as we explore this work. Like, the slower we can go. Which is against everything we've been taught.
Yeah, most definitely. I can think of a handful of women that I know that I'm in my mid-30s, who have had, like you said, they don't know what's wrong, or they give you a diagnosis and let's just take it out. And I'm mind blown at women my age who are getting this procedure done. And then, I've heard of years down the road, there are, I don't know if they link the complications, but almost like when you take an organ out that has like hormonal power, then a lot of women have to go on hormone replacements, and then that can cause other issues. And so like, I almost feel like sometimes, and some women might have it removed and be fine, but I'm speaking from my personal experience of people that I know suffer other issues as a result of losing that part of their body. And so I think it's incredible that a lot of these things can be healed.
Yes. Absolutely. And I fully believe that the body heals, period. And that all of these quote unquote women's health symptoms, even endometriosis, PCOS, fibroids, menstrual pain, pain during sex, numbness during sex, infertility, all of this stems from a disconnection from the space in our body. It is the body crying out to us like, hello, please pay attention. And it's
Yeah.
probably not just disconnection from our lifetime, right? It is, again, generational. Like if we talk about or consider what our mother's relationship was like to this space, or our grandmother's. You know, my grandmom told my mom that whiskey was the way to treat menstrual cramps.
Oh my gosh.
So I laugh about it, but I have so much love and compassion, and know that she would just be like so amazed at the work that I am doing, because that wasn't that long ago. And so, you know, I think that the opportunity that we have, and I understand how frustrating it can be to have these symptoms, to not know, we're taught that we should be able to trust the medical system, right? And when we are let down by that and kind of left lost and confused, it can be really hard to find this belief in ourselves and our body. And I'm not here to convince anyone of that. It's a journey that you really have to choose and be open to discovering on your own. And I can speak from personal experience on how profound the journey has been in my own life, and brought me to doing this work and having a successful business, and, you know, getting to work with women. It's hard for me to call it work because I love it so much, and I have so much love for even the women who reach out and never, you know, or like a post and maybe never reach out. It's all takes so much courage and vulnerability to even be curious in this work, because it is scary. Like, what is this going to bring up for me? Do I have space for it? Do I want to look at it? And that is ultimately an individual's choice.
I mean, like you said, just the incredible strength that it takes, because I didn't even realize that it was this deep. Like when when I found your page and the things that you're saying, I'm just like, wow, like I didn't know that it was a lot of, physical work, but internal work. And, I hear a lot. I had a guest that came on last season who is a shamanic healer, and she was the first person that I had really ever heard say generational trauma, and she helps heal ancestral trauma. And I was just like, what is that? Like, it's just profound to me to think that we can carry on those traumas. Oh my gosh. And so, I just wanted to highlight what you said. So, even if you don't maybe have this this flashlight go off in your head that I had this specific moment that caused trauma in myself, there are things that we bring with us. Through generations.
Yeah, absolutely. And the science of epigenetics talks about that, how our genes, we can change the expression of our genes from external factors.
You're giving me cold chills.
And that is, and even the generational piece, I think that it can be so overwhelming. I think it can be like another way to kind of skip over ourselves. All of this is held in our body. And so you don't have to start with thinking about the grandmothers and thinking about everybody else. And this can be hard, right? Because we're conditioned to attune to everybody else's needs. If we've been in survival mode, tracking safety, we're watching everybody else and not ourselves. And, I say that this is self-centered work in the very best way, because when we do it and we show up confident and inspired and trusting in our own bodies, we impact everyone around us, even like at work or in traffic or at the grocery store. When we really feel good about ourselves and we have some compassion for ultimately our body, we can find that for others. When we snap, when we are frustrated, when we project out our thoughts about especially other women, there's deep wounds with that, right? I speak from personal experience on this. I know the judgments that I used to carry, and it was all about me anyways. So why not do the work on our own body? And I really trust that as we explore that we will be given the tools and have the capacity to hold the bigger stories. And that's why I start with anatomy. I start so gently because it's, again, this being in our body, being regulate, like not trying, but just existing in a regulated state, even if it's for 30 seconds. And the body remembers that. The nervous system remembers and orients to that more and more and more and more as we practice it. And, that's what's given me the capacity to hold other women on this journey. It's what's given me the capacity to do deeper, explore more work in my own story and my own ancestors. And, I think that it's so important, especially, we serve the world better when we feel good and we're healthy and, have education about our body. It impacts everyone.
I mean, what a time. I mean, what a time to be alive, honestly.
Right?
Like it is. Oh, the science that is, proving these things that, are inherently inside of us, and just, oh my gosh, again, because like I said earlier, I feel like I lived like the first 30 years of my life just existing, like just being here. And then when I started this project and the people that I get to talk to are just like, I want all the knowledge. Give me all the knowledge. Oh my gosh. Did you have a pivotal moment in your life when you were just like, this is what's happening, what's been going on is not it for me? Like, I got to do something different that brought you into this practice? Because, oh my gosh.
I think that, so it definitely started for me when I was about 22. I had really bad low back pain and what I understand now as sciatic pain. True sciatica is a bone impingement, which is more permanent. Whether most of us that have sciatic pain, it's tension in our hips, right? Doctors wanted to give me back surgery at 22 years old.
Wow.
Most adults have bulging discs and most don't express pain. So we can live, I haven't had back pain in years. But that was my time of being like, no, I'm not going to do that. They told me quit riding horses, quit moving hay, quit skiing, like quit doing all these things you enjoy doing. We're going to do this surgery on you. And I'm so grateful that I avoided that. I started receiving body work. I got like weekly massages for a while. And, it took some time, but it did help me resolve those things. And that was, kind of the first time where I was like really waking up, I guess I would say, about the medical system. And, then exploring more self-healing. And really, I think one of my lower points was right after I had left an abusive relationship, and my worth and power was like zero. And so really exploring and reclaiming that, both in some wild and maybe unhealthy ways, and also just reclaiming freedom. Like nobody is going to beat me or yell at me or tell me I'm bad for doing anything. So I'm going to do it. And I slowly, started working along that journey. Psychedelics were a big part of that for me in a very respectful, microdosing way. And then losing my youngest sister to suicide really was the catalyst into understanding trauma at a deeper level, looking at our childhood trauma and how that impacted us, as well as inspiring me to do this work with other women, because she was heavily medicated. She did not have anyone talking about sexual trauma or the child abuse that had gone on. And, I really believe that I'm not on a mission like, oh, this work could have saved her, but I believe that women who have gone through things like she did, their lives would change. And, whenever we're medicating or numbing out, it's really to fit in a box, right? In society's box, to be able to function from day to day, to be able to get away from the sensations, the emotions that we're having. And so that is really baby sis inspired me, little Emily inspired me to share this work with other women. And like I said, I had my own body stuff coming up. So I started working with a practitioner, Alicia Patterson, here in Colorado. And, you know, it took me some time to be like, do I want to do this? Like, is this just one of those things where you think you want to do it because it's awesome for yourself? And I don't know. So I did private mentorship with her. I explored it for quite some time. I was working in a corporate role, which allowed me to have the security and the finances to do my own healing work. And eventually I went to massage school, quit my corporate job, and started doing this. And on that journey, COVID hit. And that really is what woke me up to, oh, I can't just have an in-person practice, because what if a global pandemic occurs?
Yeah.
And there was a couple layers to it. It really showed me a new way of offering this work, as well as turned me on to how I was actually using some things like in-person body work and acupuncture and even yoga to kind of numb myself and just kind of manage symptoms. And so it was really setting that time up for myself to work with my body in a sustainable way that was actually longer lasting as far as quote unquote results go, because I wasn't going, and then going to a practitioner and then going, and not giving my body time to integrate and actually heal. We just have to create the space and the conditions for the body to heal. And usually we're doing way too much for that to happen.
Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh. I'm always thinking of like, I really need X amount of more hours in the day so that I can cram more stuff into it, as opposed to just really, like you said, just kind of like taking it back and being like, okay, that's an incredible story.
Yeah,
I mean, almost to like what you're saying, like with when the pandemic hit and it kind of like forced you to maybe even like step out of your comfort zone and say, I've got to figure out a way that I can, you know, still do this for people. Has this made it more of like an ability to help more women because of the fact that you've went virtual?
Absolutely. And, you know, as much as I love, there's a couple of pieces to this, as much as I love in-person work and how powerful the body work piece can be, I can only work with so many in person.
Right.
And their practitioner burnout is a real thing. And seeing too many clients is a real thing. And that is something that personally I am unwilling to put myself. I was an executive assistant and personal assistant in my past lives. So, so I have done that. And it is so important, I think. And I know that I hold better space for everyone I work with when I am really aligned with how I am serving. And, you know, in-person work with me is a day-long thing. We don't just go right in to internal work. It is full body massage. We have time for movement, and then doing hands-on work, and then doing internal work if your body and your nervous system are saying yes. And then there's time for closing and integration and naps and, you know, snacks and all of the things to really fully receive this work. And, you know, I do 2 of those a week max.
Yeah.
So again,
I was going to say, oh my gosh.
Being able to reach, I am blown away with my Instagram following and how I can reach people from all over the world. And, you know, the education piece, I think, is a huge central, just the understanding of, and, you know, then doing this work with ourselves, because again, there's not a lot, like the internal tissue work with a practitioner is like a small sliver really of what my work is. And, you know, if we can't touch our own bodies, even like working with our belly, like that's where I usually start in my foundation program. And that can bring up a lot, you know, and it's hard to just sit with ourselves and to feel our belly and to breathe into it and to attune to this space. And I say that, 5 minutes or even 3 minutes or like 10 breaths with a lot of intention and a lot of, picturing organs that are in this space is better than like forcing ourselves through an hour-long practice or going to see a practitioner because we think that that's going to fix our symptoms. And, it's really about how we bring that intention and just have really cultivating a reciprocal relationship with our body.
So, I mean, I just want to highlight too the work that you're doing. I mean, because you're in this with every person who is working with you personally, and like you're experiencing what they're experiencing, and that you talked about that releasing and dealing with the things that are not easy to deal with. So I just want to say what you're doing is incredible. I can imagine it takes an immense amount of power and strength to do that. That's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think you have an incredible story. And I wanted to say that I hold space for you with the loss of your sister. I think it's amazing that she is still with you, like helping you do this kind of work. And I think that that's beautiful. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
I do have a couple questions that I want to ask you that I like to ask all my guests.
Awesome.
So let's jump right into those. I mean, yeah, I feel like I could just sit and listen to you talk all day because you have so much knowledge and I'm just fascinated.
Yes, we could go in a lot of directions.
But yeah. Oh my gosh. Yep. Oh my gosh. What would you say is the best piece of advice that you would give a younger version of yourself who is in the thick of struggle if you had a few moments with them?
It's not your fault. You're worthy. Your body is perfect. I love you.
So beautiful. Yeah. I think I always like to ask that question because I always think that it's important that we do think back to our younger self who was struggling, and just being able to see like where we are now compared to where we
Absolutely.
were, that, healing and growth can actually happen for anyone.
Yes.
So I love what you said to your younger self. Oh my gosh. Okay. So my last question that I like to ask all my guests, and it's one of my favorites. We like to talk about stepping into our own power and not thinking of that as a bad thing. How do you think of, or how would you describe the type of power that you try to step into every day?
I love this. I did a post about power and pelvic healing the other day. And, I really believe that our power is within us. And I was exploring the idea of, does someone take our power? Can it be taken? Or is it more as we go through life and go through different traumas and different experiences, we're forgetting our power. And there's like these layers that are coming up between our remembering that and touching that. And I really I was afraid of when I started kind of knocking on the door of this and realizing like, oh, I am powerful. We all are so powerful. There was a lot of fear, and I worked with that and being afraid of my own power and what that means. And so that, our empowerment is really remembering our power, and that is body wisdom. I believe that is feeling confident and safe and secure and trusting in our own body. And when we really embody that power, we can show up anywhere and be in any environment, and we are safe and in our home vessel, right? If we're not feeling safe and confident in our body, which we're in all the time,
right?
How do we show up anywhere and feel really, another piece of that I feel is just feeling like I belong. Like when I didn't feel like I belonged in my body or on this planet, it was just this very like deeply confusing thing for me, even though I wasn't super aware of it at the time. And the power piece is really, and that's a big part of why I do this work virtually and really believe in that piece of it, because when you touch your own body and you've been working with yourself and then you feel flutters of healing and sensation return and change occurring, you know that you are the healer and that you did the work. And remember your power and your wisdom and the ability to heal.
I can't even imagine how incredible that must feel. Like, you've got me going, okay, like, how do I jump on this? I need to do this. So, yeah. So with that being said, what advice do you have for any woman out there who may be like, you know what, this kind of sounds a little interesting to me, or I do have some issues that maybe I should have. Like, what's your advice?
Yeah.
What would you?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say check out my Instagram, and whether or not you vibe with me as to someone that you'd want to step into a longer container with, there is a lot of really awesome information on there about the body. And, there's also women in the comments sharing pieces of their story. And I think that that can be really helpful. And be gentle with yourself. Know that just exploring, just considering it, just starting to think about it is courageous, and it takes vulnerability, and it's going against the norm, right? To step out and say, I am taking healing and my body into my own hands. You are the only expert in your body. You're the only one living in it. And so as you go slow and really cultivate this relationship with yourself, trust yourself.
Oh, girl, you've got me over here like, oh my gosh. Yeah, this is incredible. I just want to be like, I'm all about like some girl power, but like, you're talking about girl power on a whole freaking other level. And I'm just like, I need that girl power. That's the girl power I need. But oh my gosh. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible story. I will make sure that I link all of your social media and your website information below, so that anyone who is interested, which I feel like there's tons out there, who want to jump on your page. Like I said earlier, you share so much knowledge. Just just going there just for the knowledge, and then the community that you're creating, the women that are around you that are supporting other women. I think it's amazing. But yeah, I'm gonna link all your stuff below so that anybody that wants to dive into that can just jump right in. So, oh my gosh, thank you.
Yeah, and I always like to say I am the one in my DMs, so I don't have an assistant or anybody. So if you message Integrative Pelvic Care, it is the real me behind the scenes, and I'm happy to answer questions and things like that as well.
Yeah. And you go live all the time. So
I do. Once a week, Thursdays at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. I'm doing the live, setting the calendar. We're doing lives.
Yes.
Those days.
So, again, sharing so much knowledge, and
thank you.
I can't thank you enough for being on the show and sharing your incredible story of transformation with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. I want to thank my guests again for sharing their incredible story of transformation with us. I'm going to link their social medias below so that you can give them a follow. And of course, if you guys felt personally connected to the story and you would like to support the podcast by purchasing one of the limited edition prints that goes along with it, you can do so at my new website. It is iampower.club. And of course, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at iampowerclub. And lastly, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss next week's episode of I Am Power. We will see you then.